Are you ready, Paul?
I'm ready to go.
All right, over to you. We're glad that you found a place in Toronto that has power. Bada boom, bada boom.
Exactly. So yeah, if you've heard on the news, I'm in Ontario, Canada. I'm north of Toronto, and I haven't had power since Saturday night. So I am at my mother-in-law's place. Not my usual background, but it's warm. There's coffee, and you know what? As I say to everybody, it could be worse. I'm safe. I'm sleeping. I'm eating. All's good, and I'm here. I have Wi-Fi and power, so I am excited to be here. And what's really fun is that this book, it's called From Workout to Last Call, which is the main title of it. But it also has a subtitle, and the subtitle component really starts to describe it. So it's a practical guide to increasing social capital, networking, and succeeding at events, trade shows, and conferences. So it's a mouthful, but the reason I was expressive like that, we have a bunch of folks here who are involved in websites. It's good for SEO, as my author said, but also when people think about an event or a conference, it's different to everybody, and a trade show is different to everybody. So the book itself, the reason people say, why the heck did you write this book? There's a lot of people who said to me, Paul, you're pretty good at this networking thing. You should write a book about it. And I've spoken at a couple of universities about it, and there's a bunch of people that are uncomfortable about it and have been part of groups like Boy & Co. and a couple other associations throughout my life. And what I've always done is help people meet others. So I'm a connector, somewhat like Giannis. But what we do is when you notice somebody who is uncomfortable, there's a reason. And so I started to write the book mostly from a networking side. And then as I spoke to people or started to develop it in public, like I started to see people doing with products, I decided to throw out little bits and pieces of the book. And then the comments from LinkedIn started to give me some more information. Like, oh, I hadn't thought about it from that angle. So this book was supposed to be released in December in my brain. But as I got more information and as people shared more with me, I started to add to it. So for example, a friend of ours, Julian out of Toronto, he had heard about this book. I was at a Boy & Co. event, and he said, I know two professors at the University of Toronto. And here's some research, or I think they did some research on introverts and why they feel like networking's dirty. And I said, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me read about these things. So anyway, that's how that part developed. And then from when I was in high school and, just doing summer jobs, and I used to set up for a lot of special events, trade shows, the Hockey Hall of Fame inductions in Toronto, car races, golf tournaments. And so I also noticed that people didn't know how to do that, not just physically, but how do you market it ahead of time, and how do you continue to follow up with people after the event, and what is something that makes people comfortable the way you follow up with them, and what makes a really good follow-up. We talk about personalization when it comes to websites and things like that, but what about a personalized follow-up? And so you need information about human beings so that you know this. So I know Carla loves to dance, and she's a great dancer, and if I wanted to reach out to her, I might say something about her stuff. We talked about my pirouette skills, Carla. I didn't get to show you. I didn't have space. But anyway, all of these things are things that make people feel more comfortable. And that's really how the book developed. And then I thought to myself, where do you actually network with people? It's at an event. It's either so if it's at a conference, there's formal and informal ways that people connect. And I started to break that down into a variety of places, things that I call networking moments. And so once you go to this event, now what should you do? You should participate in the networking moments from workout to last call. And from workout, meaning a lot of people typically, if they go to something like that, work out in the morning. Sometimes they're sponsored events. But whatever your first thing is in the morning, it's analogous with working all day. So if your last call is the happy hour or a dinner, that's your last call. If you get home after a conference, your family or your loved ones are your last call. So how do you treat them? Are you prepared for that as well? And how are you communicating with them? So that's really the impetus of the book. I've written a book before, and I came from the printing business, so I knew about how to do this. So I am self-publishing it. I do have a support of a publisher who is a friend of ours, and what she did is really start to help me with a couple of the technical elements, and she set me up with an editor. I am in the midst of, I'm about 75% of going through her edits, and this book is going to be released in June. So that's really what I wanted to say at this point, Yanis. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to do at this point.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Kickstarter? I know we've done this before for those who's been in the community. Sure. We did it with Nick Dunlap most recently for his designing content authoring experiences. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're at with that, and we can also drop the link in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be great. So why did I do the Kickstarter? So actually, Greg inspired me to do the Kickstarter when I saw that he did it and he had some success with it. And I know, what it costs to publish a book. I think I saw Yasmin on here. I think there's some upfront costs that you do. And anybody can self-publish a book if you have a little bit of money to put towards it. And so what I did is I wanted to have it set up ahead of time on this system called Ingram Spark. But the way that the publisher does it, it's very slow. And I was already putting this out there in the world, and I said, I'm going to release the book. So then I said, okay, I'm not going to wait for you. I'm going to take pre-orders on Kickstarter, and then hopefully that would help to support some of the costs as well. The Kickstarter, I don't know if you put the link in yet, but I'll put that in. You did? Okay, great, thank you. What it's to do is to support some of the costs ahead of it, but also to take orders. So the way Kickstarter works, for those of you who don't know, is if you are a backer, there's a bunch of different types of rewards that the author or the inventor can set up. And then once you hit the number, the rewards are distributed at the agreed upon time. So you can put your name in, you can back the project. If I don't hit the number of 7,500, nobody gets charged, but if we hit it, everyone gets their rewards. And the rewards take various shapes. You could have an ebook, a paper copy, an actual combination of them. If you wanted me to do something for your team, whether it was a presentation on networking, something specific, or working at a trade show, those are parts of it as well. So a quick example, Giannis, this one person that I know was talking about the book with somebody in Australia. They were unfamiliar with some of the North American trade show styles. And I gave them information about it, and they were like, whoa, I didn't even know that people did things a certain way. So that was fun.
Yes. All right. So that was the book and the process. Book coming out. That's the plan, is in June, right?
Yes, it will be printed and available in June.
Very good. So let's perhaps get to the practical guide part.
Yes.
And I know, as you already mentioned, that you had kind of the book already mentally at least done in December. And then I'm guessing that you discovered some new, perhaps, networking moments. Could you share 2 or 3 things that made you think differently and reflect about networking, as it's something that you've been so entrenched with, even more than me, for a long time?
Right.
And so I'm really curious to hear, what were these things that changed your mind when it comes to networking, made you pause and slow down?
Yeah. So I knew all of the networking moments. And so essentially what they are when you run into somebody. So the list for me, for example, I taught the titles from Workout to Last Call. It could be at the gym in the morning. There's a certain etiquette. I don't necessarily talk to you. Ladies haven't done their hair. They don't want to talk to you. But you notice them. There's that. There's sometimes runs in the morning, like Giannis, we did in Florida. That's a moment. There's meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, coffee, mixers, even in a seminar, the person sitting beside you, the hotel lobby, elevators, escalators, buses to events. There's a bunch like that. But what really caused me pause was more around the introvert and extrovert elements, and understanding the way people think and how they feel. And people always think extroverts are the best networkers and introverts are just these shy people, who I believe now are the best networkers. And the reason for that is because I call the extroverts in the book butterflies. So if you imagine, they're going from flower to flower, but introverts are icebergs, where they go deeper in the conversation. And so there are also strategies. So if you're an extrovert, what would you do that's different to help you get deeper in conversations? And if you're an introvert, how could you increase your volume a little bit so that you maximize it? And then how do you recover? Because really, I'd say if I was to give you the simplest of definitions, extroverts gain energy from networking. Introverts, they get exhausted by it. So how do you keep your energy level up and keep going for a conference that's more than one day, or an event that might, a trade show that might run 3 days? And so as I got more information, I started to put more strategies in there for people to get better at it.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Any other have questions, comments, reflections on networking moments, or if you also feel networking is dirty, or things you have learned when it comes to networking? Why don't we start with a mutual friend in Toronto, Mark? If I'm not mistaken, you would consider yourself an introvert, right?
Very much so. And I was just wondering, I mean, when you were writing the book, did you look at any of the popular business literature out there, like Leaders Eat Last, or anything else that sort of sparked your curiosity or a direction?
It did not really. It was kind of funny. I was looking for the publisher, I say that like within quotes. She said, are there comparative titles out there? And there hadn't been a book strictly written on networking in about 5 years. Like when you start looking out there, it was there were YouTube videos, some TED Talks, things like that. But over the years, I did read a few books like that. Like there was one from Mr. McKay, who he owned an envelope company, and Harvey McKay is his name. And he talked about swimming with the sharks without being eaten alive. And there were a few different elements in there about networking and getting into rooms that were full. Like he says there's no such thing as a sold out house. And there's a section in the book about getting into a private dinner, or not a private dinner necessarily, but a private function that usually is never sold out.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Let's go to Mats.
Yeah, it's a really interesting subject, and I just started a new job a month and a half ago, and sort of relived, all the mechanisms of meeting new people
Yes.
all over again after being in the same position for 10 years, only doing it at networking. There is one interesting aspect I would like to hear your opinion on, and that is, there's the difference between entering a new permanent place versus a network is the intention of permanent relationships. Is there any mechanisms in that you've stumbled upon? Because my approach was just, the same, but it actually might have triggered some me getting off wrong with some permanent relationships.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about it from a workplace, but I think it transfers well. So, for example, I think there are people that at the root of it, the social capital element, trust is huge, right? Trust is the element that we're all trying to achieve. Nobody buys from you if they don't trust you. They don't listen to your opinions if they don't trust you, all of these things. So it takes time to get to that point. And I think the point is that you have to relate with somebody and whatever that is. If they relate to something that you do, there has to be some commonality, whether in your case you work at the same place. So there's a starting point, but there's other elements. And the speed of gaining trust and getting deeper in a relationship takes time, right? Sometimes you're hesitant, depending who you are, depending on your background, depending if somebody's broken your trust in the past. But I didn't go into the depth of that part. It's so funny as you mentioned this. The reason I drew a line in the sand and said I'm going to publish in June is because as I spoke to more people like you, I thought, oh my gosh, now that's another piece. Mark had left the call. We'd started to talk about neurodiversion and some people that just communicate differently with people. So as I talked to people, I said, there's probably going to be a second edition if things go well, and I might just do it 100% on networking.
Yeah, but the funny thing is actually, because trust as a capital is exactly what makes success in networking, right? You need to be you need to have a certain credibility whenever you enter people's sphere, and that's sort of the same when the goal is a long-lasting relationship. It's just it triggered me. So thank you for your comment.
Very good. All right, Carla, I feel like you were called out earlier. I don't know if that made you comfortable or not. I wasn't sure exactly how to read the body language from here. But curious, I know you've gone to a ton of events. You've put on events. Any networking insights from your side that you want to share?
I think I'm still learning as I go too. I've found it easier when you have a spot on the stage and you're introduced, excuse me, and everyone in the room already knows who you are. It makes events so much easier because people come up to you and, they make small comments or align with what you said. I am going to a conference here at the end of April. It's a healthcare conference for marketers, and I know 0 people. My director of marketing is sending me to get leads, make new business happen, and it's terrifying because I know nobody and thousands of people are there. So I'm going to have to be that person that goes up to the speaker afterwards and makes up something just to have the opportunity to talk to them. So I think even though I do this a lot and it's part of my job, I don't know that 100% gets easier for me. And I am a bit of an introvert. So anytime you can somehow meet people more organically, whether it be, you're up there in front of them and they recognize you, or even sometimes at events, they have small group work, activities. And I've actually met some really great people through those things. So when you're putting on an event, think about like how can you get the people sitting next to each other talking to each other even for 3 to 5 minutes, and sometimes that makes it easier to find your group of friends at an event, but I don't have it all figured out.
And Carla, you bring up a great point. It is, I liken networking to yoga. You can't perfect it, you do practice it. And I think that is an important thing, and everybody does it slightly differently based on their limitations or whatever it is. But I'm going to reach out to you and give you some ideas going in, because I've been that guy. When I first got into the CMS community, I didn't know anybody for the first time at a trade show in a long time, and I'll let you know what I did.
Well, Paul, I just want to add, I think there's something special about you and how you do it, because I don't remember if you recall how you introduced yourself to me, but it was at the dinner, and I was sitting towards the table and you came up behind me and I'm like, are you coming in for a hug? And I gave you a hug because I honestly thought that's like what you wanted to do. It was, I don't know what you did there, but it was some sort of magic.
Well, that is definitely different. There's a section in the book about personal space, and but you said to me, you're a hugger, and so I said, okay, let's hug. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where if I wasn't a hugger, I might have been uncomfortable with you saying that, but it just happened to work out. We got lucky on that one. But I think the point is that I didn't scare you. I didn't, you know, I wasn't speaking loudly in your ear or something, but it was just something that was friendly.
Very good. All right, let's jump to just outside Geneva, Sasha.
Yes, just wanted to add something to what Carla said. I've had that issue of being the stranger at conferences, and my trick is if there's any way to get you on stage despite the fact that you don't have a session, that's always a good opportunity. I've used like lightning talk sessions and stuff like that, where I literally have no material whatsoever. One time I just told some funny parts of my life, and then it was like I was sort of the star of the show because everybody was coming to me and said, oh, this is so great what you did. The next time I tried that again, I seriously bombed. So it's not a it's not a guarantee, but yeah, if you have that opportunity, it's great. And the last thing was, I had a question for Paul, because for me, the most amazing person I know in terms of networking is Christopher Justice. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. Do you know him?
No.
We'll make an introduction. Yes.
Yes, because he's such a natural and he's amazing. I mean, he literally did. I mean, he has some crazy stories about the things he managed to do, not just in networking, but also even in his personal life. He's managed to do incredible things. So, yeah, I highly recommend you meet him.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
That's very good point, Sasha. I'll drop CJ, as we call him's profile, also in the chat. I think when I see people like CJ, also you, Paul, and you, Carla, you all have it. And when I then sometimes read, I know you've also generously shared, Paul, excerpts from the book, draft kind of mini chapters. And I'll be honest, and sometimes when I read about networking, it feels like, oh, this makes it so mechanic. But I think the trick is, as I've seen you do, is to perhaps have it in your networking toolbox, and then to be able to have that situational awareness, like, just that situation with Carla would make, I think, oh, that's what could possibly go wrong. But to have that kind of toolbox and say, all right, I'll try this approach now, and yes, perhaps you can make teeny tiny networking mistakes too, but if you do it with good intentions, and like was said earlier, trust is the key element, and you show good faith, and I think you can come a long way. But I like what I've already seen, Paul, is that you're like expanding, I think, everybody's toolbox in terms of here's the different options and ways of thinking to do it in a not awkward, not mechanic way, making it working more human.
Absolutely. And I think the mindset is really important. I think part of the fear or the discomfort is somebody's going to reject me or whatever. But more people are like you in the room than you think, that want to be spoken to but are afraid to approach somebody. So one of the things that's in the book is a mentality of being the host. right? If you'll notice, if you go to an event with Giannis, he's the host. He greets everybody. People come in, he introduces them to somebody else. If you meet one or two people and introduce them to somebody else and you create a group or a micro group, as I call it in the book, it starts to expand and become comfortable. So there's lots of little tricks and things to study, but it's something you just have to get into the right mindset and practice.
All right. Exciting. I do think we need a new book on this topic. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Any additional closing questions, comments, remarks? We'll certainly do another one, if you don't mind, Paul, when the book's out, and then you can actually show the book and
Sure.
hold it up to us. Let's go to Hamburg. Thomas.
Yeah, hi, I'm from Hamburg. Hi, Paul. I was just curious if there were also things for extroverts, like don't do that because you're going to piss off half of the audience or half of the attendees.
You mean, Thomas, like the not so good networkers, as we heard earlier?
Well, yeah, I
That's
think
so funny.
it's got something to do with respecting the boundaries and,
Yes.
and listen instead of just talking. And
Exactly. So I have a chapter that is extroverts, introverts, and ambiverts in the middle between the two. Who are you? So once you know who you are, you need to either tone down some things, raise some things, or even team up with somebody. So for example, if I go to a conference and I'd say 90% of the world would define me as an extrovert, I would be on, it's good for me to team up with an introvert. In fact, there's a part of the book that talks about something that I do at a bar called beachfront property move. You have to read the book to hear about that one, or at least maybe on the next one. But I'm teamed up with an introvert, and we create a physical sales funnel together because we're working together, and the introvert keeps a certain level of calm, and the extrovert has energy to bring other people to the group. So.
I think you also shared in Toronto on this note, Thomas asked about when we had a meeting in Toronto, Paul, that you joined, I think it was at the end of last year, you showed also how you stand. How you stand also as an extrovert to create a more open, inviting space that's less threatening to introverts to kind of walk into, or how you can very clearly sign also with your body language that I'm just talking to Paul over here, you know, and I think
absolutely. Body language is huge. If I'm like this and I'm just facing one person, it's tough to break into that wall. But if we're open and we look more like a croissant versus a bagel, we're open and maybe somebody will hug me, right? I'm just joking. But the point is, we will be open, and it's a spot to enter into a conversation. So it's things to look for so that you feel comfortable approaching that group, and they naturally want you to join that group.
I think that's all we had. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, all of you, Matt, Carla, etc. Those that volunteered or volunteered. Thanks for playing along. Thanks for sharing your experiences, Paul. I really look forward to getting my own copy of this book, and we'll stay tuned.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining.
thank you. Bye.
Bye.